Well, it's a great honor to be here today, thanks all for coming. So I'll just basically tell you where I am. And so I'm at the University of Utah. I'm full-time faculty there in the biology department, and that's where it pays my salary. I'm the volunteer founding president of Kuzey Doğa, which is a wordplay for Northeast Nature in Turkish. And in case you're wondering, the Nature Turkey Foundation is a USA 501c3, basically non-profit tax-deductible organization I founded in 2009, which is basically the US counterpart of Kuzey Doğa. But for those of you who know Turkish foundations, you know, this is not like a Turkish foundation. It's basically a non-profit. It's a very small one-man operation. It's basically founded to promote Turkey's globally important biodiversity and also raise awareness about Turkey's biodiversity and promote biodiversity research in the U.S. And you know, just having U.S. tax-deductible status helps us working there. So my contact information is below. My academic PDF papers are on the first website, and the second website is our nonprofit in northeastern Turkey, and it's in English and Turkish. And I use Twitter not to tell you what I had for breakfast, but to keep up people about our work. It's a professional Twitter account, so you can really follow what we do and my research and our conservation news through Twitter. In case you're wondering what you're looking at, this is Mount Ağrı, seen from Lake Kuyucuk, one of our key focal areas, and the distance is 137 kilometers. So that was a great visibility that day. So Lake Kuyucuk is in Kars, northeastern Turkey, and Mount Ağrı is also in Turkey, between Iğdır and Ağrı provinces on the border of Iran and Armenia. So it's a fantastic landscape, and this is where we work. So a lot of my work, my PhD and postdoc work, and to this day, a lot of my research is on tropical birds and actually birds globally, bird conservation in general. I'm not going to talk about it today at all, in case you are interested in that work. So these two books, especially the one on the right, The Birds and Climate Change, this is a book written for a popular audience, so anybody can read it. Well, actually, the other book, anybody can read it too. Fortunately, I'm not in nuclear physics. Actually, you can actually understand what I write about. And I try very hard to write even my scientific papers in a language most people can understand, especially the abstract. So these books are very understandable and actually, I hope, engaging. And in the Birds and Climate Change, basically I use birds as an indicator group to really explain what climate change is doing to our world, to ecosystems, to biodiversity in general. So birds are a symbol, but basically keep in mind that if something is happening to birds, it's happening even worse to other groups. And the reason is birds are one of the most adaptable groups. They can fly. They are very adaptable. And most other groups like frogs, plants, mammals, they are not as adaptable. They are less mobile. So if birds are suffering, other groups almost always will suffer more. So that's why birds also make really good indicators. So now back to Turkey. So Turkey has a phenomenal biodiversity, not appreciated by most people to this day. And I have a difficulty getting international conservation organizations interested in Turkey. They think, well, Turkey is not tropical, so we don't get the tropical interest like places like Africa or Amazon get. And because Turkey, has been trying very hard to be part of the EU, well, we actually succeeded in making most people think Turkey is part of the EU and has billions of dollars for conservation. So people think, why should we support conservation in Turkey? It's a rich European country, and they don't need our funds. So there's those two issues, and unfortunately, I was just with Wildlife Conservation Society in New York 2 days ago. And every year I visit, they're my good colleagues, and we have the same conversation. They're like, yeah, we're thinking about Turkey. This has been the case for like the past 50 years. So this is this is an example of some of the biodiversity, cryptic biodiversity you get in Turkey. So that animal, the Anatolian ground squirrel, some of you might have seen it. It's not hard to see, but it's one of those cryptic species. So we have 3 kinds of ground squirrel in Turkey. They all look like that. If you're not an expert, you can't tell them apart. But they are very easy to see and find. Well, this, it turns out, was a new species discovered in only 2007 in the backyard of a mammologist friend of mine. So, I mean, this is an animal that's, this big, easy to see. It's been there forever. It's not hiding. But only in 2007, it was discovered as a new species. And this is really unbelievable. Something like that to be discovered in 2007 is very rare, and it tells you still how many other things that are much less easy to see are waiting to be discovered. So the Caucasian lynx is a subspecies of lynx that's globally endangered, and that photo we took, and the wolf photo we also took in Kars, Sarıkamış National Park, with camera traps. These are expensive cameras that you leave tied to a tree. And when an animal or person walks across, it automatically takes 3 pictures a second. It's very good for studying rare and elusive species. But we were the first people to show that Caucasian lynx actually has a breeding population in Turkey. And in fact, I told a graduate student who studies lynx that they do breed there, and he wouldn't believe me. He thought the forest didn't have enough to eat. And I said, no, I mean, we've seen the kittens, but until I showed him this photo, he wasn't convinced. So there's still a lot to be discovered. So write these down since you came to this talk. These 2 papers, and you can get the PDFs from the website I gave you earlier, summarize what's been going on. So this is a very detailed review I worked on for 9 years. This is basically trying to summarize an encyclopedia in 20 pages. This is the most comprehensive and up-to-date peer-reviewed paper on Turkey's biodiversity, ecosystems, and conservation issues. And I worked on it for 6 years, and it was just getting bigger and bigger. And finally, at a workshop in 2009, we were talking about, young Turkish ecologists and evolutionary biologists, what can we do? And I said, there's a paper I've been working on for years, and it's just so big, it's very hard for me to kind of motivate myself to finish, because it just keeps getting bigger. So we divided, and I said, why don't you write about plants, you write about microbes, you write about climate change, you write about marine organisms, and so on, and everybody send me 500 words next month. So basically, I had the whip, and every 3 weeks, where is your chapter? Send me this. So back and forth. So 6 months, there was a lot of back and forth, and now we have this paper I'm very proud of. That really, if you know nothing about Turkey, you just need this paper. You'll know the ecosystems, the biodiversity, the conservation issues, and 250 references to go further. And this I published in Science magazine with a few friends. Right afterwards, and this is a summary. This is like a 2-page summary of what's all the environmental laws that are being changed, and really why Turkey is in the worst period of its history for environment and conservation. Because even last month, a few weeks ago, a new law that passed states that you no longer need environmental impact assessments to build dams, highways, and critical infrastructure projects. Another law that is about to be passed states that if it's in the national interest, you can build, infrastructure projects in protected areas. That means practically we don't have protected areas. If you can just build anything you think is important, well, what's the point of a protected area? So, those are really huge problems that we got to do something about, because Turkey is the only country in the world that's almost entirely covered by 3 global biodiversity hotspots. So this is Mediterranean, all the Mediterranean, Aegean, and even Istanbul is technically in the Mediterranean hotspot. And then this is the Caucasus, northeastern Turkey. and then the Iran Anatolia covers most of Anatolia and of course Iran. And I work at the intersection of the Caucasus and Iran Anatolia global biodiversity hotspots. We work in this region. And these maps are from Conservation International. This is a global assessment, and globally you have 35 global biodiversity hotspots. And most of them are in the tropics. And Turkey is the only country that's almost completely covered by 3 global biodiversity hotspots. So, and why is that? Well, there's high topographic diversity. So you've seen Mount Ağrı. It goes from sea level to, Turkey, 5,100 meters, which means at different elevations you have different types of species, especially plants. So the rainfall changes a lot depending on where you are, near the coast, away from the coast. So you go from 100 millimeters a year, this is the lowest, not average, in Iğdır province where we work, to 2,700 millimeters in Rize province in northeast, even though the distance is only a few hundred kilometers. So this is faces the Black Sea, gets a lot of moisture. So it's temperate rainforest like Washington State or Seattle. And this is in the rain shadow, so it's kind of like the Iranian deserts. It's actually very close to very close to Iran. So so Turkey is covered by 3 of the 37 plant biomes in the world. And the main reason for the biodiversity are the 3,000 endemic plant species and 122 important plant areas. And this number actually makes Turkey the most diverse temperate country of its size in the world as far as endemic plant species, and number 13 among all countries. So Turkey has the gene centers of many important crops like wheat and apple and walnut. This is a big estimate. Over 50,000 invertebrates are thought to be in Turkey, but we really know so little that even this number, 50,000, maybe 60,000. We just don't know how many invertebrates there are. But one group we know very well, the butterflies. There are 380 day butterflies, not moths. Of those, 45 are endemic, and 26% are globally threatened with extinction. And to give you an idea, of the endemic butterflies, half of them have been discovered in the last 20 years. Island and expedition in 2001, we discovered 8 butterfly species new to science in 3 weeks, going from Gümüşhane to Hakkari. And the reason for this, again, cryptic species. Butterfly species that on the surface look like each other, but when we did the molecular analysis at Harvard, we used 3 different types of analyses, and every single one, these butterflies were completely different. So that's called cryptic species. Secret species that look superficially similar, but genetically they've been separated for millions of years. So there are thousands of other species like this, especially invertebrates, insects in Turkey, waiting to be discovered. I'm sure of it. So as far as vertebrates, the numbers in parentheses are endemic species. So a high diversity of fish species and also amphibians and reptiles. All these numbers are close to the numbers found for entire, Europe, like the rest of Europe. And 168 mammal species, and as I told you, new ones keep being discovered, and 8 of them are endemic. And Turkey has had large carnivores, and most people don't even realize we still have wolves and bears, and a lot of them, quite well, relatively. Because in Europe, some countries there's like 1 bear left. And I think Switzerland just killed its last bear, which is very sad because if somebody was being threatened. So whereas in Turkey, we don't even know, we think thousands. But these estimates are, again, very basic estimates, and we really don't have the science to support them. Until 1970, Turkey had Caspian tiger, which was shot in Hakkari, Uludere in 1970, the last one. And until end of 19th century, Turkey had Asiatic lion. And leopard, for years people have been looking for proof of leopard, and actually I just a couple of months ago, somebody found a cell phone photo of leopard from Siirt that was shot in 2010. Again, a dead leopard. Somebody had shot and killed. So leopards are still around in very few numbers in mainly eastern Turkey, far parts of eastern Turkey. And I'm hoping with now the peace process, I can actually get to some of those southeastern parts of Turkey that we couldn't get to for many years. So I think there's a lot to be discovered in those places once the mines are cleared. So there's a bit of a risk there. And Turkey has a lot of major bird migration routes. The number keeps going up. In my paper, published in 2011, that number was 468. And now, 2 years later, it's 471. The most recent one was an African wetland bird discovered in Ankara, Mogan, Lake Mogan, Allen's gallinule. I mean, that bird is so hard to see. I haven't even seen it in Ethiopia, even though I kept looking for it for some years. But it somehow got lost and took a very long flight to Lake Mogan, which is a very rich site. And now they are trying to build a waterplane landing strip, or whatever you call it, like a seaport, lake port in Lake Mogan, so planes can land, so that will destroy that one too. So basically everywhere you go, there's some kind of proposal to destroy that place. And as a result of that, Turkey is one of the worst places, is one of the most in crisis place worldwide. And so what this is the most highest impact ecological journal in the world. This is an analysis published in 2005 by a friend of mine and his colleagues. And it basically classifies the world based on crisis ecoregions, critical, endangered, vulnerable. So basically kind of the breadbasket of US, the place with a lot of agriculture, eastern Brazilian coastal forests, India, China, parts of Central Asia, and almost all of Turkey is in ecological critical crisis. And the rest is endangered or vulnerable. All of the country is in ecological crisis. In eastern Turkey, the crisis is a little I guess, less bad, but it's still a crisis. And this is, so this was 2005, which means the data really came from 2004. So this is almost 10 years ago, and things have gotten much worse since then. So in 2006 World Environmental Performance Index, Turkey ranked 49th among all countries, kind of in the middle. In 2012, Turkey ranked 109th. So in only 6 years since this paper was published, Turkey dropped 60 countries in its environmental performance. This is the fastest decline in environmental performance in Turkey's history. And there's a number of reasons for this. Rapid population increase, sixfold in 6 decades. All the threats you expect: overgrazing, draining, deforestation, development, dams, as I'll tell you about, pollution, which actually is getting better. This is one area Turkey is getting better. And poaching, killing animals, collecting plants, etc. So forest cover has been reduced from 72%, and Mr. Gökit can tell you a lot more about this. This is a very, this is 2,000 years ago to original forest cover to 26%. Now, although since 1970s, forest cover has gone up by 6%. So that's one area Turkey, as I'll show you, is improving. But 86% of land area is still suffering from erosion. Protected areas cover a very small portion of Turkey. National parks cover only 1%. Protected areas cover 3%. The global average is now almost 11%. But as I told you, new laws enable building and mining in protected areas, which means these areas are not really protected if you can build in them. So practically, no protected areas. So it's not, in 50 years, 1.3 million hectares of wetlands lost, and that's 2% of Turkey's entire land area. 70 million wild bulbs and tubers exported annually from the wild, not grown. 48 mammal species extinct or on the verge of extinction, and 236 freshwater fish species, but of those, 61 only found in Turkey, and half of those are critically endangered with extinction globally. So on top of all this, now you have the climate change threat. So this is the frequency of droughts that are normally once a century, okay? But if you look at this, brown means these droughts will now happen more frequently than once a decade. So instead of once a century, you have these droughts happening every 10 years in most of Turkey, according to either climate change scenario. This is one type, and this is the Hadley climate model, the most frequently used one. And as a result, we're already seeing the results. Mount Ara, I showed you, has lost 30% of its glaciers in the last 30 years. So we are already experiencing this. And Turkey is contributing to this problem worldwide. So this is Turkey's carbon emissions. So it's not Turkey's carbon emissions. This is Turkey's energy consumption. So this is when I was born, 1975. It was about 4,000 megawatts. And now this is 2008. It's 10-fold. So 40,000 megawatts. And since then, of course, it's been going up. And remember, 2008 was the economical crisis, so it's actually started going up faster again. And most of this comes from the natural gas and coal and oil. And as a result, Turkey's carbon emissions doubled in the last 20 years. And so one proposal has been that, to increase hydropower plants because they don't produce carbon emissions. The problem is that some dams do produce carbon emissions due to rotting vegetation, so that's one problem. And the other problem, of course, is you're destroying all the rivers. A 7-fold increase planned in the next 10 years, from 264 to 1,700 plus hydropower plants, and all dams are expected to double from 2,000 to 4,000. So this includes irrigation dams too. But here's the problem. That's not going to solve the energy problem. Because first, a lot of the big dams have been built, and second, Turkey's energy consumption goes up so fast, the energy will not be enough. So this is a paper by Kaykusus Karadeniz Technical University. It's a peer-reviewed paper. And this looks at Turkey's 2008 capacity and compares it to the planned 2020 capacity. So just focus on hydroelectric and sun, okay? So Turkey's economic reserve, right, of sun is 305 billion versus hydro is 124 billion. So solar is 2.5 times more reserves. But look at the proportion of solar and hydro. So 0.3% to 24%. So with all the dam building, in 2020, the energy that comes from hydro will actually decrease by proportion to 20%. And the sun will only increase to 0.5%. So the question is, when you have 2.5 times solar capacity for energy production, why are you planning to produce 40 times your energy from hydro? So that's the question. There is a 100-fold difference in what should be logical versus what's actually done. I mean, there are many reasons for this. A lot of it is solar is expensive, this and that, but that's not an excuse because people are going beyond this. So China's one of the biggest investments in China is solar energy because they see that's the future. That's the only really possible way out of it. US, the Ivampa solar power plant in US just finished in Southern California. It's the biggest in US and produces 396 megawatts of energy. That power plant was completed only 2 years and produces more energy than 98% of Turkey's hydroelectric power plants. So it's very feasible. And we just finished this big Deriner Dam, which I'll show you, in Artvin, which destroyed a huge chunk of Çoruh River, which is really, the Çoruh River is dying because of the dams. So the Deriner power plant produces about 550 megawatts of energy and took 25 years to complete. The Ivampa power plant produces 400 megawatts of energy and took 2 years to complete. And big chunks of Turkey are in the solar zone. You can put a lot of solar power plants in Turkey and solve a big part of your energy problem. So these are the questions that should be asked in addition to environmental questions. Why are we doing something that economically doesn't make sense? Well, of course it economically makes sense, but for some people, not most people. So this is what happens. So this is the Çoruh River. you know, without a dam, beautiful landscape, rice fields, and you know, nature, villages, and this is what happens. You know, this is 2003, and on this trip we were together with Mr. Gökyet. This is the first time I saw this, and now this one is complete. This dam is complete, and this area is all flooded. And unfortunately, the threats, you know, are everywhere. So this, including my own study site in Eastern Turkey. So I discovered this bird paradise in 2005. I first saw it on Google Earth. It looked like a really good place because it was surrounded by very dry lands, and it's like a green oasis of 10 square kilometers in Iğdır, the driest province in Turkey. And I thought this would be a good place to study birds. So I set up mist nets. We caught and banded over 42,000 birds. We recorded most of Turkey's bird species. The last one was recorded 2 weeks ago. And it's actually, apparently a friend of mine told me it was in Haberturk yesterday. It's a little eastern Bonelli's warbler, which you normally get in the Mediterranean. So at this place, we tracked birds with satellite transmitters to and bird bands to dozens of countries on 3 continents. And now the government wants to build a dam, which makes no sense. And it will completely destroy this area with 45 meters of water. So I urge you to join our campaign, and basically it will take you 30 seconds to click on a online signature, and Emine here can tell you more about it. She's been very helpful in the campaign and translating a video of Minister of Environment of Turkey promising, saying it's our moral obligation to protect this bird paradise. So we had a congressman and a minister in the National Congress on TV promising to protect this wetland on June 6, 2012. World Environment Day was June 5th. And now, a year later, they're still planning to build this dam. So basically, we are trying to force them to keep their promise. And this dam is for irrigation, but it's such a dry place, you will have a huge loss to evaporation, and also you'll have a lot of erosion filling this dam because it's totally overgrazed with no surface soil in the surrounding region. And the birds we banded at this wetland have been caught again in all these countries. And they come from and they go to these countries. So we put bands on their legs with numbers, like identity numbers. And when somebody else catches it, the same bird, it says, on the band, it says Turkey, Ankara, JB02586. So that's its identity number. And then they email the Turkey banding coordinator, or ringing, it's called in Europe. And they say, hey, İlker, we caught this bird from Turkey, here's its number. And then he emails back, says, let's say that's a barn swallow that Çağan and his team caught at Iğdır's Aras Bird Paradise in 2007, on March 30th, and it's a female, and here are its body mass, 18 grams, all the details. So basically, that's how we know where these birds come and go. So blue means a bird was ringed somewhere, and we caught it. And black means we ringed the bird, and someone else caught it. So you can see that we had birds from Georgia, Armenia. We had a hawk from Israel. So this is what actually bird ringing is about. So we had a bird. So this is the first bird we ever heard from in Cyprus, and it was because it was eaten. So it was a song thrush, and Cyprus, southern Cyprus, not the Turkish part, and Malta have huge problems with people catching and eating songbirds. This is actually against EU laws, and they've been warning Cyprus and Malta for many years, fining them, but it's still happening. So people catch these little songbirds, roast them, and eat them with raka. So, yeah, so it's a huge problem, and actually it was very symbolic. The first bird we heard from was, eaten with raka in Cyprus. So we had a bird that went to Hungary to breed. We had a bird come from Saudi Arabia. We had a bird come from Russian-Finland border. And this is the Turkey record. We had a barn swallow that came from Durban, South Africa, from 8,000 kilometers. It's a bird this big. And we had one of our own swallows was caught by Dutch scientists in Kabwe, Zambia. So here's an area that's where you have birds that come out. Oh, there's also a Kazakhstan duck. Again, this was actually a French hunter emailed me saying, I shot this duck in Kazakhstan, it's got your ring on it, can you give me more information? Well, this actually, hunters are quite important. We have written articles for hunting magazines in Turkey saying, if you find a bird with a band, please report it to us. We're not going to ask any questions. These data are very important. Most recovery data in the US or Europe comes from hunters. And that's why the migrations of waterfowl and ducks are much better known than the migrations of small birds. So the recovery rate of a ring or a band for some types of duck is 10 to 20%. So you hear back from 20% of all the birds you ring. For a small songbird, like we track, it's 1 in 5,000, 1 in 10,000. So it's enormous amounts of work. So to get these data, we had to catch 42,000 birds over like 14 seasons, over 8 years of very hard work, 6 months a year, spring and fall, 3-3, 7 weeks, 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, 5 people in the field are working in the swamps, in boots, getting birds out of nets. This is the hardest work you can imagine, and we got volunteers doing this. So these are very dedicated young people, and despite all this work, now this whole paradise, they want to destroy it. So with all these problems, it is not a surprise that Turkey ranks so low, especially in biodiversity and habitat conservation. So in 2010, out of 163 countries, Turkey ranked 140th. In the bottom, 14%. Well, you think you can't go any lower, so this is overall environmental performance. But 2 years later, we actually managed to drop from bottom 14% to even lower, to bottom 9%, and in overall performance in the bottom 17%. So we are in the same category with countries like Syria, Iraq, Libya, and Haiti in environmental performance. The rest of these countries are war-torn. Haiti has earthquake. They have some excuse. So what is Turkey's excuse? So you can get the stats here, and every 2 years Yale updates this. And this index is based on data that they get from the government. So this is not even their data. So this is publicly available data, and this is probably the reality is even worse. And here's the detailed profile of Turkey. So the good news is, green means improving, right? So as far as pollution, air pollution, water pollution, disease, Turkey's performance is improving. And this is its global rank here. So this is overall performance, rank 109. And on the other hand, when you look at issues to do with ecosystems, such as biodiversity, 121st, and water resources especially. The worst decline, for minus 45. So on the right is the decline. The more brown means more decline. So the lowest possible score is minus 50, and in water use, it's minus 45. So this is basically dam building, and also water extraction. So basically, water resource ecosystem effects has shown the worst decline. The good news is forests. So in forests, Turkey ranks 42nd worldwide. So that's the biggest, the best performance among all countries. And the best improvement is in disease. So the dark green means, the best improvement possible is 50. So we got 49. So, the disease overall is declining in Turkey. So that's the good news. So you can see the whole thing every 2 years. So 2014, they're going to have another. But as far as biodiversity and habitat indicators, Turkey completely fails. So this is different types of biodiversity protection, and score out of 100. So overall, 17, biome protection, 19, critical habitat protection, 0. And marine protection is 31. So all of these are, scores of failure. So basically, the general picture is if it has a direct impact on human health, like air, water pollution, and also forests, things are doing better, but for biodiversity and ecosystem protection, other creatures, we don't care. They can die. So the good news is, because it's such a low starting point, it's there's a lot of room for improvement, big conservation opportunity. Turkey is mostly neglected by global organizations, I told you already. Topography gives us an advantage against climate change. Things can move higher. Big potential for biocultural tourism, and Tema is a big leader in that. And actually, after I met Nihat Bey, he twisted my arm very strongly, and he broke my arm actually, but to lead Turkey's first bird watching tour. And Tema was the sponsor, and we had a big success. 276 bird species seen in 3 weeks, and still this record is unbroken for a bird watching tour of Turkey. And Tema still does these tours and bee tours and plant tours and other great tours in northeastern Turkey. So, especially in eastern, in eastern Turkey, many people make less than $1,000 a year, so limited funding can help people a lot, especially in ecotourism. Many young people are eager to learn, and we use that a lot. We have a lot of volunteers, and a lot of these volunteers don't really help us that much because they need training, but our goal is to expose them to nature and also biodiversity research. And our work takes place in this part of Turkey, which is on a major global bird flyway. These are bird migratory flyways. And I told you where it is, so we are here. So I'm going to talk a bit about our work there. So this is an area of huge agricultural, cultural, ecological, and historical diversity. So the mission of Kuzey Doğa is to work with local people, students, and institutions in northeastern Turkey to study, to do research on biodiversity, to undertake ecological restoration, especially of wetlands and forests, publicize and promote the region's biodiversity, so a lot of work with media, do a lot of public outreach, so have events. For example, this last weekend, we celebrated World Migratory Bird Day in Aras Bird Paradise, and conduct environmental education at different levels, from primary school to PhD level, and promote village-based ecotourism in the region. So Lake Kuyucuk is one of our big projects. This is an amazingly rich site. It's only 2 square kilometers, but we have counted more than 40,000 birds on it at times, and we recorded 227 bird species. The big problem is cattle. They're in all the reeds. So we tell people, your cattle can graze all the fields. That's fine, but just keep them out of the water. I mean, they can drink water in certain areas, but they are destroying all the reed beds. So so because of that, we have to work with local people, explain them why we're doing this, why it's important, and why ecotourism will help them, bird watching especially. So we also do mist nets. In fact, today, right this day, these nets are going up again in Kuyucuk now that it's spring. So in Aras we start in March, in Kuyucuk, because it's higher, colder, we start in May, and today our nets are going up again. And this is the swallow I told you about that came from South Africa, from 8,000 kilometers away. So that's the kind of data we get with bird ringing. It's a cute animal. And this is actually a new project. And let me actually show you this. So this is the first time in Turkey 3 globally endangered Egyptian vultures have been caught, fitted with satellite transmitters, and their migrations tracked. This is a very different project for a couple of reasons. First, each transmitter costs $4,000. And for getting the data from France, I have to pay $100 per bird every month. Well, no, 3 birds, for 3 birds. So that's, another $1,000 a year just to get the data. The reason is, the transmitter is like a little backpack, 45 grams, communicates with the France's satellites. It's the Argos system. And the satellites send the data to France, and the France data center emails the data to me. And if you want the data, you pay. So it's a pretty sweet system. And so this, I just brought with me one GPS GSM transmitter this time. And basically, that transmitter doesn't use satellites. Instead, Egyptian vultures text me where they are. So basically, it uses the GSM network, and I get messages from my cell phone with their GPS coordinates, with their speed and elevation. So that's not cheap either, but at least, it's the same price, $4,000. But at least I don't have to pay France every month, like for their data. And these transmitters can last for 3 years. So that's a lot of data fees. So this is the first time in Turkey these animals were caught and tracked. It was amazing data because one bird went to Iraq, unfortunately died there. And when we stopped getting signals, I emailed my colleagues in Iraq and I said, here are the coordinates. The bird looks to be in a village. It was probably killed by people. Can you go look it up? So in only 48 hours, I got an email from them with the photo of my transmitter. So they got in their car, drove to the village, to question the villagers, and found the transmitter. It's a village near Necef. And basically, it sounds like the vulture was poisoned. Because when the vulture was found, it was on the ground, no injuries, but unable to fly, just kind of, dizzy. And poisoning is a big problem with vultures worldwide, because people will throw poison meat. So people will poison dogs. And dogs die, vultures eat it, vultures die. Or people throw poisoned meat for jackals, in Africa for lions, to kill predators, to protect their animals. And again, vultures eat the poisoned meat, or the poisoned animal, they die. So it's a big problem. And the other 2 vultures went all the way to Ethiopia, and that was my hope, because I studied birds in Ethiopia since 2006. So my dream was always to catch a bird in Turkey, then to catch the same bird in Ethiopia. So we didn't actually catch it, but we actually watched them go to Ethiopia. It was an amazing journey, and these transmitters also record elevation and speed. So the vultures, the fastest they went was 59 kilometers an hour, and one vulture got up to 8,000 meters above sea level. So the height of Mount Everest almost. So, and these animals normally like it hot and dry, but they catch rising hot air, so they can rise very high. And this one bird, named Iğdır, actually we named the bird after the Iğdır province, covered 20,000 kilometers in 7.5 months. And then it came back on April 5th and actually flew above us again, at Arasur wetlands. And it became the first animal in Turkey whose entire migration has been tracked from beginning to end. So this is the first time bird's migration has been tracked. The transmitters were given by the Minister of Environment and Forestry. And unfortunately, now that the first has been done, they're not interested in giving any more. But, all we have right now is one bird who went and came back. The other 2, and the other one disappeared in Ethiopia on March 6th. So the problem with these studies is, you cannot just do it with 1 or 2 animals, because what does that tell you? It's like talking to somebody in Istanbul, one person, and then saying, this is how people in Istanbul live. It doesn't work that way. You need to do it at least with a few dozen animals before you can really say what's happening. So now, but the good thing is we got one transmitter back from Iraq, so we put it back on. But so we're always, looking for sponsors and supporters of this research because it's so expensive and labor intensive. But the good thing is we work very hard to share the results of our research and work with the public so they understand what's happening. So our press release on this was covered by Hürriyet, Milliyet, Posta, and all these other papers with a collective readership of over 6 million people. So basically 6 million people potentially learn about vulture migration and why it's important and how these devices work. And that's how you build environmental awareness. Okay, so, and of course, you can't do it just with press releases, so we do a lot of hands-on environmental outreach. And this is with, especially with birds, this is very good. Because here you see, I'm holding, or Emrah, our coordinator, is holding a female black-capped warbler. So once we band a bird, we'll let, each bird, a child will release it, and they'll feel its heartbeat and have a connection. And that really can change their lives, and many of them stop using slingshots afterwards because they can't kill birds anymore, and plus their curiosity is satisfied. And this education also works for people like governors and other politicians. The people who are looking at it as are the mayor, former mayor and former governor of Kars. I'm telling them about bird ringing, and behind me is the current mayor of Kars. So basically, this is the first time they've seen this, They understand why we're doing this. And of course the media, the news media comes, so that way we can communicate this to a lot more people and build awareness. So for our work, in 2008, we won the Whitley Gold Award from Princess Anne. And this actually, got a lot of national attention, including, President Abdullah Gül called to congratulate. And that really helped us with a lot of our work. So in 2009, we applied, and Lake Kuyucuk became a European Destination of Excellence. This is a Sustainable Ecotourism Award. Out of 55 applications in Turkey, Lake Kuyucuk was the winner. And this is very important for getting international attention to ecotourism there. And in 2009 also, Lake Kuyucuk became the first Ramsar wetland in eastern Turkey. And Ramsar means a globally important wetland. It's named after a city in Iran where the wetlands agreement was signed in 1974, I think. And that's very important because this is only one of 14 Ramsar wetlands in the entire country of Turkey. And it's a major global distinction. And it helps with ecotourism. We won this award because right after, right the same time, Kuyucuk became Ramsar. And in fact, the jury, the Turkish Ministry of Tourism jury, called me and asked, right before they decided, are you sure this lake will become a Ramsar wetland? Are you sure? And I said, I promise you. I promise you it will. I told the governor I showed you, he was a very good man. In fact, there was a problem with the Ramsar because, some official in Ankara was worried about declaring this a Ramsar because then they can't build on it. So the governor called the official and I said, I promise you it will become a Ramsar. And because it became a Ramsar, it also won this ecotourism award, which helps local people. So protected areas promote ecotourism and help local economies. That's proven everywhere. And our biggest achievement, and the one I'm most excited about, is creating Turkey's first island for, artificial island for wildlife, in this case birds. And that little dot is our land cruiser, and the person is me, so you get the scale. This is bigger than Galatasaray Island. So it's, about 1 hectare island. And the idea was, this is an old road, not used, that divides Lake Kuyucuk. And this part of the lake was dying because, there was no water transfer, it was evaporating. And I was trying to remove this road, but one day I thought, why do I have to remove the whole road? If we just remove 50 meters from either end, then we have an island where birds can nest safely, free from cows, sheep, dogs, foxes, and people. So I told the governor you saw earlier, and he was a very enlightened man. He understood why we were doing this. And I told him on a Friday, and on a Monday, on next Monday, we had 2 bulldozers, 2 excavators, and 2 trucks at our command. They worked for 3 months to remove this, and I made them add this to the rest of the island to create mud flats for shorebirds. And while doing this, we almost lost the truck because I didn't think about the mud. I'm not a civil engineer, so I was this was a civil engineering project, and I'm just like, I have a piece of paper where I just do this, cut here, add there. So this truck starts going on the side, and the excavator just goes around and reaches and pulls the truck back. So that was pretty quick thinking excavator to drive. But fortunately, we didn't lose any trucks. And this cost the government $260,000 US in labor and other expenses. And we now have Turkey's first bird nesting island. So in only 10 days, birds colonized and started breeding here. And September 2011, we counted 179 places where birds had roosted and nested. So unfortunately, last year was a very dry year, and the water evaporated and part of this connected. And as soon as it connected, the shepherds brought all their cows and destroyed the entire vegetation. So now it's like this again. So that's the problem with conservation. You can never declare victory and then go home and have a drink. You always have to be watching. And of course, and now the governor has changed since then. So I told the governor, I go back to the governor and I said, this is what happened. We need excavators to cut. He said, well, I can't give you an excavator without a permit. That's a Ramsar wetland, it's protected. I'm like, yeah, but you know, so of course he was right. So now we're trying to get the permits to bring the excavator back. In the meanwhile, there's no problem for shepherds. All their cows are on the island. Nobody asks them for permits. So it's always this like constant fight. Anyway, so that's why we have to be there, and that's why my organization is based in Kars, because you have to be responding immediately. This is half an hour from Kars, so we can go there back and forth. Any threat that comes up, we can respond. It's very important to be based there. But you know, it's -40 in the winter, so it's very hard for me to find people to work in Kars, especially good people. So it's a huge challenge. So my team, I'm very thankful to have them because you know they're very dedicated. And I'll end with some good news. And this is the Sarıkamış project. This is completely different. From lake, we go to these forests, pine forests, plus pine forests with wolves and bears. It's also the Sarıkamış ski area. And it's a beautiful landscape that's about 2,000 to 3,000 meters. And this is where it is. So this is the national park, this is Kars, this is Erzurum, this is Ardahan. So the problem with this forest is, so this is the remaining forest, 400 square kilometers in green. So, and this is a very sacred forest because 90,000 Turkish soldiers died here in 1914, 1915, the First World War. Most of it froze to death. So you think, you know, a national park would simply protect the whole forest. No, this is the national park. Does this make any sense to you? You know, most of the national park is just like meadows, and most of the forest is logged by the government. It's legal, it's official. And only 60 kilometers square of forest is protected, 340 square kilometer forest is logged. And think of it this way. 100 years ago, 90,000 soldiers plus 30,000 Russians died in this forest. They mixed with the soil, and the trees took them up. You know, that's just the way trees work. So in these trees, you have the remains of 90,000 Turkish soldiers. And you are logging them and selling them as furniture. So I just hope, you know, people realize that, you know, this is just, you know, we cannot do this and actually expand or change the boundaries of National Park, Sarıkamış National Park, to cover the whole forest. So that's something we are trying to create awareness of. But anyway, so that's the way it is right now. And this area has a lot of wildlife, including brown bears, lynx, wolves, and wild cat, which we recorded for the first time in Eastern Turkey, roe deer. The problem is these wild animals don't have much to eat because people poach roe deer. They kill the boar because, you know, it destroys their fields. Red deer is gone. So you got these carnivores, but not a lot to eat. There's hare, and then there's rodents for foxes. And this is a badger. See, it's going by. This is takes 3 pictures a second. These camera traps. Each camera trap, by the way, costs $800. So all these devices we use are quite technically inexpensive. And this is a korucu. So when he saw this in the forest, he thought, oh, bomb. You know, so he takes a photo, takes it to the jandarma, and jandarma, of course, knows we're working there. But, you know, we get some interesting things like that. And, of course, these camera traps sometimes get stolen. You cannot use these camera traps. They're very specialized, but people steal them, thinking, you free stuff, and then $800 just gone. This is a wolf pack walking across, and this is 7 wolves spent the night in front of these cameras. This is a brown bear. It's a squirrel, Persian squirrel. And this actually, my student, undergraduate student, just did this analysis, and it shows you the problem. So this is brown bear numbers, photos per 100 nights. Okay. So brown bear is actually 295 photos, so it's actually off the charts. So you're getting hundreds of photos of bears, you know, a lot of photos of wolves, hundreds of photos of foxes and wolves. But where is the prey, you know? Wild boar, much lower than wolf. Roe deer, almost nothing. Red deer, nothing. So these animals, you know, they're these animals, but they have nothing to eat. So they spend a lot of time in the Sarıkamış garbage dump, and they also attack, you know, people's sheep and cattle, creating big human carnivore conflict. So a big part of our project is to reduce the human carnivore conflict with surveys, with education, with talks to the local villages, and ecotourism. So it's a lot of working with people. I mean, conservation is about working with people. And in addition to, so these trees, okay, when they were being cut, I stopped and asked, you know, how big are these trees? You know, how many trees are you cutting? He said, oh, you know, a contractor from Mersin just bought 3,500 trees. So these trees are going to Mersin and for probably furniture. And I said, how big are they? He said, oh, 100, 200 years. So each of these trees have seen the Sarıkamış battle and have seen, you know, all these soldiers dying under it. And we are selling them to Mersin for furniture. And on top of that, local villagers are cutting trees in the national, which, you know, the 60 square kilometer forest, and even that is under pressure all the time. And you can see this. So this is legal logging, and this is illegal logging. And red is where we found droppings of wolves. So, you know, wolves are all over. And so this is one of the bears that are feeding in the garbage dump, because, you know, that's a big source of food for them. And unfortunately, when they come to the garbage dump, they have to cross a highway and a railroad, so sometimes they get hit. The bigger problem, and this is a problem we warned the government, but nothing has been done. You have a garbage dump where you can come and see bears from 5 meters away, and people now, more and more people come. But that also means they can kill them. So we warned people, but nothing was done, and eventually 2 years ago, we found this bear killed. Look at the size of that. So we actually managed to save its carcass, and it's now stuffed in Kafkas University, and at least for students to see and admire. It was exactly 8 feet tall, 2.4 meters, and we weighed it in a truck scale over 300 kilos. This is the biggest bear ever recorded in Turkey. The bears in Artvin, during an ODTÜ study, 8 bears were caught. Their range was 70 to 160 kilos, just males and females. This is over 300, so it gives you an idea how big this thing is. It's a monster. And it's, but you know, harmless, just eating garbage and not bothering anybody. It has this beautiful pattern, cream, goes from all the way down. And this pattern is only seen in northeastern Turkey. So, so this wolf from a camera trap. So this is our wolf project I'll tell you about. So in 2000, for the first time in Turkey, we caught and tracked with GSM transmitters wolves for the first time in Turkey. So these transmitters send us text messages. So we get text messages from wolves. And these text messages have wolves' GPS coordinates. And this is the other one. He's waking up from a drug. That's why he looks very switched out. But you know, that is the transmitter. They're fine. They live their lives. And this is the home range of the 2 adult wolves. Look how big the area used. This is the entire Sarıkamış forest, and that's one wolf. And this is, you know, only a few months of data. So to summarize, one wolf used 5,400 kilometers squares in 1 year. That's the area of Istanbul province. Sarıkamış National Park is 230 square kilometers. All of Sarıkamış Forest is 400 square kilometers. So it's nothing for these animals. They need much bigger areas. And so these are 2 wolves, and we tracked 2 adult and 3 young wolves. Only 1 wolf survived the whole year. 4 out of 5 wolves were killed. 2 were hit by cars, 1 was shot by people, and 1 was killed by village dogs. And an average wolf lives like an average dog. You know, 7, 8 years, as long as 15 years. So these animals, out of 5 animals, only 1 lived a year. So huge pressure on these animals. So, so last year we did another first for Turkey. So brown bears, for the first time in Turkey, we put National Geographic critter cams on. So we tracked them, which was not a first for Turkey. But we also put, well, this is the tracking device, and this is the camera, okay? So this camera records every hour. You can program it for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you decide. The memory is 11 hours, so when the memory fills, you know, about a week, then you program it, there's an automatic release, it drops, and then it starts beeping. But of course, you have no idea where the animal is, so you have to drive around with an antenna on your car, looking for the signal, and once you get the signal, you get out, recover the camera, download the data. So it's a lot of work, but it means you see the world through the eyes of a bear. And it's amazing footage. A lot of it is bears, not surprising, sleep a lot. So we learned that, especially during the day. That's one problem with these cameras. They can't record at night when bears do most interesting stuff. But we still saw a lot of them. You know, we have footage of bears eating kuşburnu. You know, dogwood, like just grabbing and eating all the red berries. They're eating juniper, Ardich berries. They're drinking water. There's very interesting one. There's a time when a female bear is just sitting in the forest, just resting, looking at the forest. She turns, and there's a wolf 2 meters away, and she just turns back. And she like doesn't pay attention. So it's amazing. You would think like there's an interaction. No, they just they know each other from smell. So these are like neighbors. And the most interesting was a female bear spent on the edge of a beautiful canyon. We didn't even know where this canyon was. We'd never seen it. It's very deep in the forest. She spent 20 minutes watching the sunrise. She just sat there and just watched as the sun rose. I don't have an explanation. It was a warm day, so these bears have a lot of fur and fat. So she wasn't cold, she wasn't eating, she wasn't drinking. She literally watched the sunrise for 20 minutes. So it's very interesting. So all this footage has now just been finished editing as Turkey's first National Geographic documentary. So hopefully sometime this summer it will be released. It was supposed to be released in May, but then the sponsor backed out, so now they're looking for another sponsor. So eventually we'll hopefully see it. And it's not just the bears footage, but also the filming of our catching the bears and everything. And that's like one scene, and this is National Geographic Greg Marshall, head of Critter Cam project. So he came with these cameras, and it was a 12-person team. My students, Aisha and Emra. So a lot of work, a lot of big work, big teamwork. So with all these data, we convinced the government, Turkey's government, to create Turkey's first wildlife corridor. Sorry the slide is getting cut off, but that's what it says. And this is actually a very major project. So this is where we begin. Kars, Erzurum, Ardahan, Artvin, and this is Georgia, Kosovo. And this corridor stretches 162 kilometers and covers 28,543 hectares. And it's actually bigger than the Sarıkamış National Park. And I'll show it here too. So the yellow areas are deforested. Green is existing forest. And there are 3 main areas that need to be reforested. And this is a very simple idea. In 2008, I just told the government, you know, you do a lot of reforestation, why don't you do it in those places, the 3 areas, so you connect them. And it took 4 years of, 3.5 years of talking, but once they saw the wolf map, they finally understood what I'm talking about. One picture, is worth 1,000,000 words. So once they saw the wolf map, the same month, December 2011, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the government. My organization has nothing to do with reforestation. We have 4 people. We cannot do this. So it's Ministry of Environment and Forestry, all major divisions involved, the reforestation and erosion control, national parks and protected areas, tree planting division. So they gave this contract to a tree planting company. It's going to cost the government about 14 million lira. 4.5 million trees will be planted, hopefully, in the next however many years. And as a result, with 2,500 hectares of reforestation, we'll connect 51,000 hectares of forest, including national park, Sarıkamış National Park, to each other and to the big forests of the Black Sea and Caucasus. So this will enable these animals to move up and down. And also, of course, this corridor itself is a technically protected forest. It's a new protected area that's bigger than 71% of Turkey's national parks. So it's itself a protected area. So it's very exciting. Anyway, oh yeah, this is I guess I already told you all this. This is the process. Yeah, so this is all the bureaucracy, a lot of convincing. So again, a lot of this work is just convincing people and talking to people. And here's the cool thing. I told you, we are tracking bears now, and these are the data from 3 bears we tracked. So this doesn't mean much, to you, but look at this one. So this is Sarıkamış National Park. This is the corridor I proposed, and this is the route the bear has taken. So it follows the corridor almost exactly. So this is, of course, the corridor isn't being finished yet, but this shows you that the animals will use this corridor once it's reforested. Right now, they only use it at night. During the day, they hide in the forest, only at night they'll come out and they will move very fast. But once that whole area is forested, they will be able to move much better. And also, of course, the corridor itself is a place they can live and feed in. So we are quite excited about it. And this is why all this expensive equipment and research is so important, because without these data, you have no idea what's happening. You have no idea a bear is actually, this is only like 3 days. A bear is actually walking, I don't know, 300 kilometers in only 3 days, and then it came back. So for these animals, this landscape is nothing. You know, they can move thousands of kilometers in a year, but most people, without seeing it, will not believe us. They think, you know, a wolf is like a dog, and it just like runs around their village. So with these data, we are trying to convince the government to, you know, create more protected areas. And if you're interested, you know, there's a lot of stories in English in my website on this, on these projects. And this was in the New York Times a couple of years ago. And that's the reddish shelter from Kujuk, by the way. This was in the New Yorker. And you can download the PDFs on my website. This was a Christian Science Monitor. And I want to end with the message, please, you know, join our campaign. If you can, write a letter, like an actual letter, to the Prime Minister saying, you know, this area is very important. And by the way, the campaign website has more data than you want. You know, it's all the background information there. Just a short letter saying, you know, I think this is a globally important site. We think it should be protected in this area. A lot of research has been done. The second most studied area in Turkey for birds. Second most, the highest number of birds banned, and it should not be destroyed. So thank you. Thank you. Sorry.